So Florence Nightingale, I'll give a little brief, not introduction to her, but why this topic? Because I was seeing the whole morning we are going in the flow of interfaith harmony, intercultural diversity, inclusivity. Though this guest lecture, which runs for about 45 minutes, followed by a conversation. Yes, you have to hold your breath. It's a guest lecture. It will take about 45-50 minutes for me to talk about Florence Nightingale, and then we will open it up for a discussion. Talking about that, this comes in the field of someone who's speaking right now through cinema, interpreting religion. I think it was you. Yes, so this is reinterpretation of the idea of God, of theology, of good and evil, of many such themes by Florence Nightingale. And how did she interpret these themes into her life and for the kind of work that she did? So we know her in the field of nursing, but Nightingale left for us 10 diaries, 10 notebooks, about 10 notebooks, and 5 to 6 of them only deal with religious philosophy. There's one notebook on nursing, but 5 to 6 of them deal with religious philosophy, and this talk is going to be focusing on the religious aspect and her understanding of religion, which she brought to her nursing career. I will play a little introduction for those who are unaware of Florence Nightingale, because I don't want to get into her biography, but it's important for those who are unaware of it. You'll play that? Just play. Yeah, and volume. I think you'll need volume. It's full from there. Elvis, from there it's full. It's 100. It's 100 on the laptop. 100 on the laptop. She improved sanitary conditions so much that she garnered reputation as a reformer and advocate for public health. During the Crimean War, British troops being it's coming to this. The army turned to Florence. You want me to continue till you... Okay, all right. I'll continue till then. A bit about Florence Nightingale's childhood, which is not there in this video, to give you an idea what was her childhood like, though this is a little bit adult biography. As she was growing up, she attended ball at the Duke of Tuscany. As a teenager, she loved to dance. She went to opera 3 times a week, and Mozart was a favorite composer. This slightly changed when they moved to Geneva. It was in Geneva that they saw Italian political refugees, and the contrast from a luxurious life to a life of people wanting freedom. And it is where her beliefs were slightly shaken about life. Her interest in nursing was there from her childhood. As a child, she used to put band-aids on dolls. She used to play with the dolls and dolls as patients. And she would go with her mother visiting relatives who were unwell.
1820, into an upper-class British family.
Visiting people who were unwell. As a little girl, she liked visiting people who were unwell and to give care to them. But when she wanted to join nursing as a career, her parents strongly opposed it because it was 1840s, and around that time, women were not allowed to opt for a career like nursing in upper class families. It was seen something lowly and something which had no prospects. She had to fight for it, but the consent was not given to her. Then she made up a plan of going for 2 weeks in Germany just to learn this course quietly on nursing. 2 weeks, the parents agreed to it. You can do a 2 weeks course in nursing. That won't change much life. Well, but that changed everything. Her trip to Germany, and there is where she had heard throughout her life that nursing is where women come from different backgrounds, they use foul language, and they are not Catholic enough, and everything else. And she says in one of her letters, I had heard more indecencies from girls who are daughters of her evangelical friends, and I had to do hostess in the nursery than I ever did all in my life. So she finds all the lovely people in hospitals, and she says, I have never heard all those things that you ever speaks about. And this she wrote to her mother in one of her letters. We can play this now?
Florence Nightingale was a pioneer of public health and the founder of modern nursing.
Because of Florence Nightingale, nursing is one of the most regulated and respected professions in the world.
Named after her city of birth, Florence, Italy, Florence Nightingale was born on May 12, 1820, into an upper-class British family.
As a woman of her time and her class, it would have been expected that she would marry, maintain a lovely home, and be a hostess. But Florence Nightingale had very different plans. Though at the time nursing was not a respected profession, Nightingale felt very called to become a nurse.
At age 24, Nightingale defied her parents' expectations to marry a suitable match and left England to study at the Kaiserswerth Hospital in Dusseldorf, Germany.
When she returned from Germany, she took a job as a nurse at a hospital in London, and she was eventually promoted after only a year to be head of nursing there.
She improved sanitary conditions so much that she garnered a reputation as a reformer and as an advocate for public health.
During the Crimean War, the British press made public the horrendous conditions of the wounded soldiers in Turkey. The army turned to Florence Nightingale for help.
Sidney Herbert, Secretary at War, reached out directly to Nightingale. When Nightingale and her band of nurses arrived at Scutari, the hospital in the Crimea, they were shocked at what they found.
The field hospitals were positioned on cesspools of putrid water. Patients were lying in their filth. More soldiers were dying from infections than they were from wounds sustained on the battlefield.
Many of the reforms that Florence Nightingale instituted were quite revolutionary. Nightingale insisted that there be fresh air and water for all the soldiers, that recuperating soldiers receive healthy food to eat to help make them better, and that all of the bandages and sheets and blankets were adequately laundered each day.
By the time she was done, Florence Nightingale had succeeded in reducing the death rate within these military hospitals by 2/3.
Known as the Angel of the Crimea, Nightingale returned to England and received a hero's welcome, a medal from Queen Victoria, and a gift of $250,000. She devoted the rest of her life to effecting change in medical care.
In 1860, Florence Nightingale founded at St. Thomas Hospital in London the Nightingale Training School for Nurses.
She was a pioneer in the use of cutting-edge statistical methods of the time to design hospitals and medical systems to maximize the health of the community at large.
This really helped her to make her message known to the parliamentarians and government agencies who would make important decisions about hospitals and healthcare.
In her later years, Nightingale was officially honored by Germany, France, Norway, and numerous prestigious British societies. She died at her London home on August 13, 1910.
The fact that we have a nursing profession today is in large part thanks to the work of Florence Nightingale.
So that's
Mark Twain is now thought
of, and reducing deaths by 2/3 to the nursing career is quite a leap why people believed in her. but I will be looking at her religious philosophy. The key discussion points for today will be I'll be jumping the first two topics for now, for the time being. I'll be looking on her religious philosophy, on theology, her ideas on Christ, on good and evil, a very little bit introduction to comparative religion and Christian feminism. How do we come to know all of this? Through her letters. They are humongous letters. They are just letters and letters and letters. She was a woman of records who would keep receipts, letters, records, everything. And this is a letter to her mother where I said that quote from, which she wrote to her mother. She wrote to her father, "Why cannot a woman follow abstractions like a man? Has she less imagination, less intellect, less self-devotion, less religious than a man?" She wrote this to her father, and in such a way she would write to her sister and to the fellow poets who were her friends. And this is what she wrote to the person from the military, Sidney Herbert, which is, "Never had a happy moment till I went into the hospital life. Never had an unhappy moment," in 1900. She says that she believed she received a call for this profession in 1837, when she was 16 years old, which she puts down in her diaries. And here I will slowly begin with her philosophy. In Nightingale's view, suffering would be better than indifferentism, pain better than paralysis, better to die struggling in the breakers seeking a new world than to stand idly on the shore. She wanted to do something. She wanted to make sense of her life, and marriage was the last thing to do for her. For her, that was almost like a suicide, which she says, spending a life with a man in making society, arranging domestic things, to be nailed to a continuation and exaggeration of my present life, without hope of another, would be intolerable to me. Voluntarily to put it out of my power, ever to be able to seize the chance of forming to myself a true and rich life, would seem to me like a suicide. Because of the pressures to get married, she would suffer some sorts of mental breakdown. But eventually, of course, she never got married, and then she found her calling as nursing. Before beginning with nursing, she had two important travels. One is to Germany and two is to Rome. And both these travels has a massive impact on her life and her philosophy. Then the Crimean War happened. Because of the Crimean War, she was asked, would you come as a nurse? And she brought a band of nurses to the Crimean War. And this is where, when she returned after the Crimean War, after saving 2/3 life, she became regarded as a national heroine. This was the time when the poet Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote a long poem, and this is where he coined the term, "the lady with the lamp." There are a couple of poems written by poets at that time on Nightingale's life. Also, the lady with the lamp was a soldier's nickname, because the soldiers would often see her in the night with a lamp, and so lady with the lamp, because she has a habit of walking in the dark walkways to care for wounded soldiers. Also, the reference to her in the poem is made to Saint Philomena, and these are two different paintings. One is by Henrietta Ray, and the other one is unknown painter. They both look very similar, but one is, on the right is Nightingale, and this is Saint Philomena, which is a patron saint of sickness. and I just realized that there's a church to her dedicated in Goa also. And there's a cathedral in Mysore. Yeah, there is a lot of connection to India, which I don't want to bring it in this discussion, but if we have some short time later, we can bring it in the conversation. I'm skipping quite a bit. Maybe in the discussion I can take some things. Hospital architecture. She loved visiting churches to observe the architecture of the churches. And she would sketch the church architecture in her notebooks. And based on those architectures, she designed hospitals. That's an immense contribution of Nightingale to hospital architecture. The trip to Egypt is something I'll return in my second last slide, which is where she met Sisters of Charity and many other groups, and especially the religious philosophy in Egypt introduced her to comparative religion. That was the time she read a bit about Islam, but quite a lot more about Hinduism and Buddhism in a later part of life. She took copious notes of whatever she was attending, and whatever she couldn't understand, she would just leave it in German as it is. On her religious philosophy, but this is when she came across certain lectures and certain understandings where there was a rift between Protestantism and Catholicism. And this is where she says, the Protestant, it is said, do not feel so much for their purer God as the Catholics do for their unjust one. But we can hardly call the Protestant God a God at all. What does he require of us but to go to church once a week? The Protestants have hardly any God left at all. They were so occupied with the absurdities of Roman Catholic Church that, as often happens, they did not perceive that they had left to themselves no God at all. This was early understanding as she was. Of course, we have to look into many situations. We just have to jump to conclusions. To look about the context, the time in when this is written. That's very much important also than jumping just to conclusions. And two is also to leave space for a seeker to think. At the same time, she despised her own Church of England. And then there are reasons for that, which she says, I dislike and I despise the Church of England. She received me into the bosom, but what has she ever done for me? She never gave me work to do for her, nor training to do it. If I found it for myself, O Lord, my heart is not ready. It longs to find its home. All will for me is on the other side. From what you think, conviction alone hangs back. This also many times, this particular line reminds me of Mother Teresa's letters. If you ever chance upon her letters which she wrote to the 5 priests, which were her superiors, the very fascinating letters when she felt that there is no work for her to do, but she wants to do so much. Gradually, there came a time after her first nursing appointment, she gave up going to the church. And she did not attend church at all. But she continued reading theological books. She studied them. She read her Bible. She recorded her prayers. She did all of this, but without going to the church. There came a point when one of her very dear friends asked her to be the godmother to Sidney Herbert's children, and she denied it. She denied a lot of her dear friends to be the godmother because this is what she wrote in one of the letters, because I felt that they would think my religious opinions, if they had known them, very unorthodox. It is then in 1874, I'm jumping to the end, but I'll again come back. She did not go to church for about 17 years. And this she wrote in a letter, where she writes, she had tears in her eyes when she was passing the church, just to rethink that I've not visited this place for about 17 years. But she continued doing her prayers all by herself. And why? I'll also come about church attendance, but continuing to pray. Why? Yes, this is the reason why. Because she did not believe that there is a God who is power hungry. There is a sadistic God who wants to be praised every time. But Nightingale's God is more loving, generous, and well-intentioned. Not only does God forgive, but He corrects and guides, making sure that you become a better human being. And therefore, religion to Nightingale is not an act of worshipping, but an act of cooperation with God, where you are involved in the process of running the world. You are not passive. You're an active substance who runs the world with the actions you do. And your actions matter. And it is your action, therefore, which can be the prayer, or which can be that worshipping that we talk about. So, therefore, one can work to do God's will. One doesn't need to only go to church, but one needs to act upon it. This is also very similar to Dorothy Day, who also believe in actions. And God for her, then she writes in next letter that God does not want to be praised, to be adored, to have His glory sung. And we can scarcely conceive a God as a man. And she scorned the portrayal of God as an angry and vengeful. I mean, no God, no creator would want to be a murderer. Why would He want to punish you? That was a God, something which Nightingale did not believe in at all. Yeah. At the same time, she entirely rejected the doctrine of eternal damnation. There could be no such thing as eternal consequence for evil to anything poor, weak, ignorant. Now, two things. I firstly spoke about the church attendance, but at the same time she was praying. She was continuing what she wanted to do, because her theological idea of God and of worshipping was in action. Similarly, when she is rejecting the eternal damnation, it is also that she has her spiritual reasons, which is she doesn't believe evil as negative. And I'll come to that when I'm come to next slide, next to next, on good and evil. But we'll come to this point of why no eternal damnation, why no evil. Christ. She kept a picture of Christ crowned with thorns in her bedroom. Nightingale was more interested in her writings, at least from what we can interpret, in the Father than the Son. And then she puts in one of the letters, "Oh, why could He, irreplaceable, not be spared? But when the Father gave up His own Son to die, He might well have said, 'No, not the precious one.' Yet the Son was given. We may not try to be perfect, even as a Father in heaven is perfect, in giving Him our best, even as He gives us His best." Which she was referring to, of course, was in every action that we do, can we give our best? And giving our best would mean sacrifice. Everything that you do, or every gift that you do, or every giving that you do, can you do it with a sense of the best one. At the same time, Nightingale's God were not some fathers in heaven. Nightingale's God was in life, in human life, where we all are involved. And therefore, Nightingale's God was vitally involved in the world. Nightingale's God cared for it. And Nightingale's God would be around when she is weeping. So, any calamity or anything, and they would not intervene. God would not intervene by way of miracle. But she also says, it is up to humans. You can work as co-workers and make miracles happen. That is a possibility. But don't sit and just hope for a miracle. You have to be a co-worker in the project of that. And therefore this quote, again, this is all her letters. I am of certain convinced that the greatest heroes are those who do their duty in their daily grind of domestic affairs, while the world whirls as a maddening traitor, which is your smallest duty, which you do every day, maybe from morning that you, especially this I can also look in the context of Marxist feminist notion, that how so often women's more than half, 3/4 life, I think almost whole life, gets ignored, either ignored or their contribution in any aspect, even running in a family. It's considered an invisible job. But the world is visible because of that invisibility. And this again, she brings it up in a Christian feminist ethics. I would just like you all to read it on your own. I'll skip the slides very quickly, because this is something we all can always think and have been thinking. I come to good and evil. Nightingale believed that evil had a positive purpose. And that positive purpose is, evil is there so that you could become a better human being. How do you become a better human being when evil exists? Firstly, evil does not come from opposite of good. Evil comes from the good. Evil is not negative. She says in one of these letters, what a deep philosophy. What theory or world has ever gone farther than this? The evil is not the opposer of good, but its collaborator. The left hand of God as the good is the right. In the early temples, the evil spirit is the brother, not the foe of Osiris. This view makes Satan a servant of God, not his enemy, because good can come from evil. Which she's trying to explain is the possibility that with evil, with something that goes wrong, there is a learning. And can we learn from that? If there is a learning, it works positively for you. If you have not learned, no one can help you. So the learning is very important, and that every learning in your life will make you a better collaborator with the God and as a human being. But if you have not learned, just imagine 10 years of your life, you have not been a collaborator with the divine plan. You're far, far away. That's where she's referring to evil, because evil can always be, generally is referred to as an outsider. No. You have to learn from evil. It's a collaborator for the good, for more goodness to emerge. Nightingale's Bible expertise were put to use. Now, one school asked her, would you write a Bible for children with your interpretation? And she agreed. And 1873, she worked on a Bible for the children. And in one of the letters, she writes, the stories of Achilles and his horse is far more fit for children than Balaam and his ass, which is only fit to be told to asses. The story of Samson are only fit to be told to bulldogs, and the story of Bathsheba to be told to Bathshebas. Yet we give all these stories to children as holy writ. Some stories in Homer, and maybe with Sophocles and Aeschylus, she maintained might be better. They can be holy writ. And the school skeptically incorporated all her changes except for few paragraphs. And that was her idea about, and that eventually, of course, the Bible was eventually produced by the School for Children. I'm going to talk for like 7 minutes more and then I'll open it for discussion. Coming to comparative religion. Nightingale was an avid reader. I think from what I was reading about the book she has read, if we put all the people in this room together, of all the books that we have read, she read more than us. That is the amount of authors. I was just going through what all has she read. Okay, coming to, she was very well acquainted with Greek text, with non-Christian religion, with mythology, but when she traveled to Egypt, she received a deep understanding of Gnosticism. And that's where she explored pre-Christian religions, the churches, of course, the mosque, and the temples, the Jewish temples. This is where she was exposed to this idea of comparative religion. And it is here also that she later studied Hinduism and Buddhism. She even went to the extent of saying that Brahmanism is quite monstrous because it's a religion of hierarchy. And Buddhism is a beautiful social reform. But Buddhism is a beautiful social reform, but also they don't have an idea of perfect God. So of course she was exploring all these ideas. And a letter from the Viceroy written by St. John Lawrence to Florence Nightingale. I mean, you can imagine how aware was this woman with her letters. A Viceroy is not eating cow in India because cow is a sacred animal, and this woman knows that back in London. That was the gravitas of the letter she was writing, and she was trying to understand world cultures at the same time. That's why I said she was a woman of records. And she wrote all that by herself, not with an assistant. Coming to the concluding part of Christian feminism. From what I understand, and a lot of biographers understand, and I reading her diaries as it is, without any changes. It doesn't seem that she was aware of any sort of Christian feminism or any writings, because by the time she was writing, there was no Christian feminism existing. If it was in 17th and 18th century, but by the time she was alive, those books were not anywhere. And in fact, Elizabeth Candid Stanton's Woman's Bible was published in 1895, which is roughly 50 years after Nightingale. And the Feminist Analysis of God by Catherine Binchefel was published in 1923, which is like 20, again, these are 20, 30 years later than her. But she made a lot of claims for women, and she was bold enough in talking about her identification. She saw nurses, women, and people, and herself as a Christ, as a savior. And there could be many such people who could be saviors and agents of God. She had quite many complaints, and one of the complaints that she made is in one of the letters. Why have women, passion, intellect, moral activity, these three, and a place in society, but in a church, none of these can be exercised? The Church of England has for men archbishops, bishops, and a little work she has for women. What? They would give her their hands, their hearts, their hands. She will not have them. She gives neither work to do for her, nor education to do it. If she had it to give, many women would have willingly given her their life's work. Luther gave us faith, justification by faith as he calls it, and the Church of Rome gives us works, but the Church of England gives us neither faith nor works. Jesus Christ raised women above the condition of mere slaves, mere ministers, to the passions of the man, and raise them to his sympathy to be ministers of God. In the later part, which she also writes in feminine language, which is she starts using feminine language for God, changing the pronouns entirely. That is the extent to which her Christian feminism works out. Yes, and that point I will have to come. Can you please play that for just, maybe we'll play at 2 minutes. We'll just listen. This is the song played during her funeral.
The Son of God goes forth to war, a kingly crown to gain. His blood-red banner streams afar. Who follows in his train? Who best can drink his cup of woe, triumphant over pain? Who patient bears his cross below? He follows in his train. The martyr first, whose eagle eye could pierce beyond the grave, who saw his master in the sky and called on him to save, like him with pardon on his tongue, in midst of mortal pain, he prayed for them that did the wrong, who follows in his train.
Thank you. So this, a bit about this song. The state offered her a state burial. She died at the age of 90 from a heart failure in 1910. Because of her accomplishments, she was offered eligible for a state funeral and the burial at Westminster Abbey. But as per her will, she did not want anything of that sort. She wanted a very quiet funeral, just with the ones close to her. And therefore, the memorial was held in St. Paul's Cathedral, London, and there is where she was later laid to rest at St. Margaret Church in East Wallow. And this is Florence Nightingale. I would love to take up some questions if you have.
We'll open up the session for questions for just a quick 5 to 10 minutes. So if anyone has, please feel free to ask.
Even it can be comments. I would like to listen how Goa listens to Florence Nightingale. When I put the message, everyone in Bombay is like, why are you not doing this in Bombay? I'm like, I do 100 things. Let me take Florence Nightingale at least to Goa.
So I shall hold my peace.
No, please.
Okay. It's more of a comment. When you spoke about good and evil as collaborators, and you said that from evil, even good can come. While reading it, I had a different interpretation, that good is contextual. And good and evil are collaborators, because good can exist only with the existence of evil.
Yeah.
So maybe that would be another interpretation of good and evil being collaborators.
Yeah, good and evil are collaborators.
In the sense that I cannot say something that is good unless there's a comparative. Because in isolation, it would not be. So that was just another interpretation of what you said.
Yes. Yeah, they both coexist.
Yeah.
They coexist. Our entire life is about two opposites, actually. There's nothing that stands in isolation.
Exactly, it's contextual, yes.
Yeah. Yes.
My question was regarding, she used to visit the churches and she used to copy that architecture, and then that architecture she used to design for the hospitals.
Right.
So which hospitals were designed with those architecture which was borrowed from the church? Any idea?
Long list of hospitals in Germany. In fact, it may surprise a lot of us that she was also, during the independence struggle, her policies, her ideas were incorporated in India. She was writing on, she was very happy the British came to India and were resolving the problems of sanitation and hygiene and health. But later, she also mentions that they went to do better, they were doing better, but when they're leaving them worse than what they were. But and therefore she was referring, she's writing to a lot of institutions all over the world. So many hospitals were designed on her. I can't name a few, but maybe I could just go through my notes and give you names few later. But why she was designing also, because like if you see the example, when I could give you windows, the idea of fresh air, which are in huge cathedrals with huge windows, this didn't exist in hospitals then. They were very claustrophobic. So how she brought fresh air in, then how she brought the use of linen in, all those things. And there are many things she did I have not touched because I was considering a religious philosophy. She was world's first female statistician. She is a hardcore woman of statistics. Why did you think people took a woman seriously? No, women are not taken seriously, unfortunately then. Unfortunately, even now, not much has changed. Not much has changed. She was doing it with statistics. She was creating pie charts and showing the mortality rates. She was regarded as a first statistician.
We have time for one more question, perhaps.
And Dr. Omkar, I really appreciate you as you have brought the life of Florence Nightingale to all of us. And I particularly got this knowledge first time. I didn't have it and didn't know about her much, but the way you have put it up, it really touched me. And especially as you explained, I could sense that the whole life of hers was in search of God. Everywhere she touches, maybe good or evil, maybe doing good to the people or in service of people, maybe going to the church, not going to the church, but her heart was in search of God in everything that she does. So thank you for this privilege that I had from your listening.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm just going to add to what Sister was saying, that is, why Florence Nightingale? It's not just Florence Nightingale. I keep on doing these talks on various such people, like one is Dorothy Day, then there is Saint Teresa of Avila. Why these people? Because the way they interpreted religion and God is extremely different. And the way they write it in their poems and letters, and how they make sense of it, and finally coming to, can we come to a point, she was doing through her nursing. Dorothy Day said very simply, this beautiful painting by a painter, where she's sitting and she used to offer soups. So she was offering a soup bowl to a beggar, but the beggar looks physically like Jesus. And the idea is, if you cannot see Jesus in the person next to you who is poor and weak, what is point of your religion? Can we do that? Can we do that? And then coming to when morning the keynote speaker, Mr. Rajendra Kerkar, was talking, the one thought that suddenly flashed to my mind was saying John of the Cross's poem. I was trying to remember, I couldn't remember the exact phrase, but there's a worshipper who says, God, I want to love you, I want to hold you, I want to kiss you, and God is denying time and again. But then eventually God says that all the hatred that is in the world, that's all me. Now kiss it and embrace it. Can each one of us embrace the hatred and swallow it? If we can do that, I think we reach to being a better human being. I think life is only a project of being a better human being. I consider myself maybe 20% human, I don't know. Can we be somewhere more? That's why I do these kind of thinkers. Can we be? So yeah. I think we can take one more.
Yes, I think the last question.
Again, not a question, but appreciation for what you enlightened us with this. 3 points that really appealed to me. One was this whole thing of it's better to suffer than to be, do nothing about it, just stand on the sidelines. And that's fantastic, because a similar thing of better lighting a candle than cursing the darkness.
Yes.
So this is actually the situation that faces all of us in India, where our democracy is slowly being, well, not slowly, but quite trampled upon. Okay? The second thing is not treating God as somebody just to be worshipped, but practically working with people, working with God, co-creators and all that sort of thing. So the important thing of working in our given capacities, and I always tell students and everyone, each one of us has got tremendous creative potential, not just Dr. Omkar Bhatkar. The important thing is how do we get in touch with what our creativity asks us to do, and working with God and through the dimensions that He's given us. What I liked was also the greatest heroes are those who do their duty. Our mothers at home may not be very highly educated, but fantastic. A thankless job that they do day in and day out. So that goes a real salute to all women who do this day in and day out. So even if you do that at home later, so you're not less than anybody else. Okay?
I think every man in this room in this house needs to start doing all the jobs that women do at their home.
Yes.
If they want to talk about equality.
Yeah.
Because that's equality then.
So a real, eye-opener, thinker, and she was really a feminist. I didn't imagine at that time, So fantastic. Very, very good thoughts. Thanks for eye-openers.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone in the audience for your questions. A big thank you to Dr. Bhatkar for having this session and enlightening us and throwing perspectives that we hadn't been aware of with regard to Florence Nightingale.